Welcome to this week's Wolverine Confidential. I'm Ryan Zuke.
I'm Andrew Kahn, Michigan men's basketball beat writer for MLive.
I'm Aaron McMann, Michigan football beat writer for MLive. Zuke, welcome back.
Thank you.
Spent the week in St. Paul for
I
the Frozen Four. Michigan obviously bows out there in the semifinal. Tell us about the game and kind of what went wrong for Michigan and everything else.
Right, yeah, I mean, great start for the Wolverines. Getting off to a 2-0 lead early, and then it was Notre Dame scored a power play goal early in the second, cut the Wolverine lead to 2-1, and they ended up scoring 3 straight. And but Michigan came back, tied it up with 5 minutes left, and then the season ended just like that with a late goal in the last 6 seconds.
Yeah, I caught the third period. It seemed like it was back and forth. It was obviously a good finish and everything else. What was the reaction afterwards? I mean, the players. I'm sure they were disappointed, right?
Completely shocked. I mean, they had the puck in the offensive zone with 10 seconds remaining. It was they're either going to score in that last 10 seconds or it's going to go to overtime, and then Notre Dame breaks the puck out, has a 2-on-2. Seems like a meaningless rush, but they had some good speed. One guy takes it wide. The Michigan defenseman angles him off a little bit, and his only play was to throw it to the middle of the ice. And sure enough, the defenseman Quinn Hughes, who's been their best defenseman in the second half of the year, doesn't tie up the guy in front, and Jake Evans, the Notre Dame's leading scorer, finishes it off for the game-winning goal with 5.2 seconds left. So a tough way to lose for Michigan. I mean, players were shocked, coach was shocked. I mean, they thought they were headed into overtime, and then their season ends like that. It's a tough way to end.
When they step back and look at this, I mean, I feel like it's somewhat similar to the basketball team. You know, before the season, you say you're getting to that final weekend. It's a great thing, but at the same time, then once you get there,
right,
you want to win it.
Right. I mean, Notre Dame was the number 2 ranked team in the country, but they split during the regular season, and 3 of those games were 1-goal games. So I mean, you knew it was going to be close coming in, and I mean, with 3 Big Ten teams in the Frozen Four. You played all 2 of those teams combined like 5 or 10 times during the season, so they knew what they knew what to expect. But overall, great season, great run. I mean, they were below 500 in January, so to go on the run they did, to finish the season 22-15-3, it was quite the season. And Mel Pearson he'll have this program back and hopefully maybe in this tournament for years to come.
I was just going to talk about. I mean, that speaks to the job he did, right? First season. I mean, obviously he's inherited some talent and recruits and everything else. But at the same token, I mean, they made the run. You mentioned how they were struggling early in the year, but to make that kind of run and get that far, I mean, that's an achievement, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think he really got the younger players really start to buy in midway through the season.
Okay.
I think he had a stern message in the locker room to get these guys going. And you could see it in their play. They were playing with a lot more confidence. The goaltending, although Hayden Levine was a little shaky on Thursday, that was the day of the Notre Dame game in the Frozen Four. He played well in the second half of the year, and the people I talked to on the national level at the Frozen Four, not one bad thing they had to say about Mel Pearson. They were really impressed. He's a genuine guy. I mean, he'll go up to anyone and have a conversation. I think that really helps in the hockey world and being able to attract recruits. And they have a pretty good recruiting class, it sounds like, coming in. And they lose the top line of Tony Calderon, Dexter Danks, and Cooper Marody. But other than that, everyone else is going to be back this next year for most likely. I mean, obviously, Josh Norris, first-round pick, Ken signed. Quinn Hughes will be drafted, but I think they'll both be back. So future looks bright. And then Cooper Marody, who's a junior, just signed yesterday with the Edmonton Oilers. So he turned pro, won't play his senior year at Michigan, which is not too big of a surprise. And then Tony Calderon, who had a great senior year, was a big reason for the turnaround this year. Scored 25 goals this year, which is 5th in the nation. He signed with the Dallas Stars yesterday as well. So
now I'm going to ask a question that, of course, I know the answer to, but some of our listeners might not, and I actually don't either. Is the Frozen Four in St. Paul every year, or does it move around?
No, it moves around. Yeah.
Okay.
Next year it'll be in Buffalo.
Okay.
So probably going to be cold there. It was cold there as well.
Well, yes, it should be, I guess.
Second coldest ever Frozen Four this week.
I actually knew it wasn't because I was in Tampa, the Tampa area one year, and it was that just 2 years ago? It was in Florida, was it not?
It was
I mean, that
Tampa,
kind of shocked me. But I guess how did St. Paul, I imagine, would really embrace this event, and it was a lot of
right.
There was
a
a lot of
Duluth
hoopla
fans.
around town.
Yeah,
and a lot
Minnesota Duluth ended up winning it. Last team into the tournament, so they needed
Oh, wow.
a whole bunch of scenarios on the final day of the season for them to get into the tournament. That happened, and sure enough, they go on to win 4 one-goal games to win the NCAA tournament. So
They were the Cinderella team.
Yeah,
they were the
jeez.
Cinderella.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than basketball
Sure.
because, I mean, these teams are all, I mean, it's a lot.
Not much separates even.
I mean,
Okay.
I saw a stat the other day. The last team into the tournament has had a better record than the #1 overall team
Okay.
in the last few years. So,
Okay, so
That
interesting.
says-
that kind of says a
yeah.
little bit. So it's not as big of a Cinderella
Sure.
story, but I mean, still great for Duluth. I mean, outside of Minnesota, I'm sure not many fans know where that school is.
Yeah.
So it's about 2.5 hours from St. Paul, but good turnout for fans for them, and an exciting championship game too.
You were there for the championship game.
I was.
Notre Dame was, what were they ranked, second?
Second, yeah.
So it was, I mean,
Duluth was 11th.
11th.
Yeah, so another great game. Duluth gets out to a 2-0 lead, and then Notre Dame pulls within 1, and it was an exciting third period, and then the Bulldogs held on. So it's their second championship. The last time they won was against Michigan in 2011.
Oh.
Last time the Frozen Four was in St. Paul. So
interesting.
yeah, I guess I'm sure they're hoping that it's there every year.
Yeah.
2 years from now, it's going to be at Little Caesars. So
Okay,
get ready to buy those tickets, Wolverines fans. If you want to see your team, hopefully maybe make a run there locally, but we shall see.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, we move from hockey to football, just like that.
Yeah.
Spring game.
Spring game.
Yeah,
right
it's
on
coming
the heels
up.
of this.
It's coming
Frozen
up.
Four run.
Saturday. Oh, it was going to be evening, and now it's still evening. They moved it up a little bit. It was originally, kickoff was going to be, I think, 7 o'clock. They moved it up since to 5:45. Reason I haven't heard a reason yet.
No, the better question is why it was,
Sound-
why it's ever in the evening time. It's kind of
Yeah.
a strange thing this time of year. You know, the weather is going to be iffy.
Right.
You know,
They really
have it
were
while the
s-
sun's out.
They were selling it as like a night thing, and I think they
Yeah.
wanted to do it under the lights, and I think they still can to some degree. And maybe the very end of it might, it might start getting darker, then the lights can come on. But you're right, it becomes a weather thing. I think, April 14th. It's always a juggle. You don't know if it's gonna be warm, if it's gonna be cold. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, it can get real chilly out there. The players would be fine with it, but it's not exactly conducive to garnering a huge crowd. And that's kind of what they want. You see Alabama, you see LSU, you see some of these schools down south. They draw 30, 40, 50, 60,000 for their spring games. And Michigan, I think, can draw that on a good day with good weather, but with the unknown, you never know.
What is their typical attendance? For
I mean,
spring
it varies. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
the weather's so huge, right?
yeah, it varies. I mean, they could draw anywhere from 40 to 50, 60,000, like I said, but if it depends on the weather, expectations, what else is going on. There's so many variables with that type of stuff.
It's a chance for fans to see, I mean, as many seats as the big house holds, it's still, tickets are not, inexpensive.
Right, right.
So, it's a chance for people to just get in the door
Exactly.
for free to see the Wolverines on the football field.
You see a lot of families show up, people that have never been in the big house before. Obviously they're Michigan fans, or maybe they just want to experience the environment. So absolutely. In fact, I think my first experience with the big house was a spring game many years ago when I was a kid. So it's, like you said, it's a good chance for families and people who don't normally get an opportunity to see this team.
Where are you
play.
going to be watching for during the game?
Several things. We've heard at this point the quarterbacks are all taking equal number of reps in practice. I'm not sure if that has changed yet. That was something Jim Harbaugh has said, a couple times now. We haven't heard from him in about a week now. So I don't know if that's changed, but I'm curious to see the snap, numbers. Obviously, we're looking at Shea Patterson. That's a big if right now, whether or not he's eligible. But I think so many people just want to see him throw. I mean, we've heard so much about him. We've seen his tape from Ole Miss. You've heard things about him. People have these high expectations for him. I think they just want to see him get out there and throw the football.
I mean, how much can you really take away from a spring game, though? Too, I think it's
Right.
no matter what he does, it'll probably be overhyped a little bit.
You're right.
Blown up,
There
of
won't
course.
be any hitting, especially in the quarterback. I mean, there won't be a lot of that stuff you'd see in a normal game. But it's not, like I said, it's an opportunity to see these guys live, see what they can do, with people watching and TV cameras on and things like that. So I'm curious to see how Shea Patterson comes out. I'm curious to see how Brandon Peters responds. I mean, he's a guy who I thought at the end of last season was going to be the guy here in 2018. And now things have obviously changed with Patterson and the potential of Spade coming back, and there's all these different scenarios. I'm curious to see how he's handled that just mentally. I mean, you know, if you're him, you know, going into that Wisconsin-Ohio State game, he thought he was going to be the guy, you know. And then the Outback Bowl, he had an opportunity, and he even said this to reporters, that he had the opportunity to show that this was his job, that he could have locked this down and taken it. And he didn't play well in the Outback Bowl at all. So there's a lot of things up in there. Dillon Mccaffrey is another wild card, someone we've heard a lot about, haven't seen play much. You know, there was some concern about his size and everything else. You know, we haven't talked to him, we haven't seen him, but I'm curious to see what he looks like just physically. So I mean, there's obviously the quarterbacks, there's the offensive line. We're hearing more about the tackle position now. You know, I'm curious to see how Michael Dwumfor, defensive tackle, on the defensive line, we've heard a lot about here in the last week or two from the coaches, from the players. Sounds like he's emerged at defensive tackle. I'm curious to see how he responds and how he plays on Saturday. So there's just so many things. I mean, there's all these position battles, all these different players. Another guy that came up last week, Jim Harbaugh mentioned on his podcast, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Apparently, he has been the best receiver in practice this spring, which I think is a good thing. I'm curious to see how Tariq Black responds given his injury last fall. So there's so many things. I'll be publishing something later this week for MLive.com detailing these in depth, going down the biggest things I'm looking for. But I mean that's basically it.
And if it's the ones versus ones in the spring game, as I think Michigan has typically done, at least in recent years, it'll be the offense will have its hands full, of course. I mean, Michigan lost some key players from that defense, but they're still expected to be, an elite unit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they got 9 of the 11 starters back.
Okay.
All 4 of their starters from their number 1 ranked secondary in the country. So I mean, they've got pieces all across the board. And you mentioned the ones, and I think that would be the case on Saturday. They've been practicing that way for the last couple of weeks now. I guess that wasn't necessarily the case last season. It was more, their own individual units were going up against one another. So ones would go up against ones in the defense, and twos would go up against twos on the offense. And now you're starting to see, I guess, them practice ones versus ones in practice in spring. And that's apparently not been the case the last few years. So they are, competition has been heavy here in practice the last week or two. I suspect you'll see that spill over into Saturday.
It's just funny, for fans, like when you watch a spring game or any sort of intra-squad competition, like, what are you cheering for? I feel like typically it's offense. Like people like to see a touchdown, even if that means it was against Michigan.
Right.
I guess I would say, if the offense has success against that defense, that probably bodes well. I would say
it would, yeah. And I think. And I've been gung-ho, this is the word we keep talking about on the podcast, about this receivers group, since the start of spring. I think they have the biggest leap to make. I'm curious to see how they respond with some of these talented wideouts and Peoples-Jones and Black and Oliver Martin and Nico Collins. The offensive line has to make huge gains here. I'm curious to see how they end up against this defensive line. You've got, I think the interior of the line, I've talked about this before, is solid. I think they know who's going to be there. But you've got 4 guys basically competing for the 2 tackle spots. How they're able to guard a Rashawn Gary and a Chase Winovich and those type of guys, I think if they're able to hold their own and play pretty well, I think that bodes well for this team going into fall camp.
Is there a player that people aren't talking about at all? That could. I'm just thinking, like last year, there's a freshman kicker that was kind of a unique thing to see. Like, we've never seen. Can he do it here at the college level?
Yeah.
Obviously, you've hit on the main one.
Yeah,
with quarterback.
Michigan had several guys last year, and high-profile guys, obviously Donovan Peoples-Jones and a couple others who enrolled early. Michigan only had 3 this year.
Okay.
I think the guy that everybody will be watching will be Joe Milton, the quarterback, 4-star quarterback out of Olympia High School in Orlando, Florida. He's considered right now, in the quarterback competition. I think he's getting reps as well. Obviously, he's a true freshman, so he obviously starts back in the depth chart. He's not going to get the same consideration as some of these other guys. But he's a guy we've heard a lot about, got a good arm, good athletic ability. He's mobile in the pocket. Folks are, I'm sure, going to be looking at him. Other than that, I'm looking at these, and I've said this, I can't say this enough. I'm looking at some of these younger guys who played last year, like a Peoples-Jones, like a Tariq Black, to develop. If they can develop and they can take that next step, especially the offensive end, the defensive side of the ball, I think is going to be fine. I think they'll be top 5 again nationally. I think they'll have no problem. It's this team and the success it has in 2018 is going to come down to the offensive side of the football.
Gotcha. Well, Aaron, Ryan. there's nothing that's changed with basketball since last week, in that they are still the national runners-up, something to be proud of. But there is some news, I guess, this week as far as you've got the team banquet on Wednesday night, and the Portsmouth Invitational tournament is this week. I know not too many people know about that. It's for seniors. It's for players who are going to be graduating, usually who are not, not like lottery type picks for the draft, that are trying to catch on, get some extra reps in there to catch the eye of an NBA team, or even there's going to be international teams, some overseas clubs keeping an eye on that. So Zach Irvin, for example, participated in it last year for Michigan. Did not get drafted, although now he's in the G League in the Knicks organization after first starting overseas. So it'll be interesting to see. They have not released the full rosters yet, but Michigan certainly has. All three of the players who are graduating would be candidates. They all fit in that mold of not a surefire NBA pick by any means, in Muhammad Ali, Abdul-Rahman, Duncan Robinson, and Jerron Simmons. So I see them all as potential candidates, but we'll find out. But just another thing I just thought would be fun to sort of look at is like the top moments from the season. I mean, it was, again, they played 41 games. There were a lot of them. I think the number one would be, many people would share the same one. I know.
Jordan Poole shot.
Jordan Poole shot. That would probably be, I think that'll be the moment from the season that people look back on. I remember kind of where I was when that happened.
You remember where you were?
I was. It was St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
All right. Well, maybe people won't remember where they were then.
Well, we were enjoying some tasty beverages at a local fine establishment. But yeah, I do. I didn't watch this team a ton this year. I watched some of the bigger games, and everything else, and most of their tournament games to some degree. But from my vantage point, that will be the play that I remember.
You could tell when they were down, like it was pretty quiet in there, and like fans were frustrated, and then just like that,
interrupted.
It interrupted.
Yeah, no, I'm going through. I'm doing still recapping some of this stuff. For stories and kind of rewatch. There was 6 points there. I mean, that's not a ton. That game was tight throughout against Houston, but. That moment in particular, and sort of everything that came after it. That shot alone, fine, but just the image of him, Poole running around the court, not wanting to get tackled. I believe we mentioned on this podcast Wagner stopping to console a Houston player. Just sort of the whole scene. That's got to be number one. And then if you're going by. Sort of the importance of along the run. Duncan Robinson hit a 3 against Florida State that kind of pushed that game to 10. Turned out it got back to 2 in the final seconds. He had to make some free throws to get there, but just because of where it was in the Staples Center, that place was that was Chrysler Center West Coast that night, that weekend. Honestly, that place was just full of Michigan fans, and how loud it got there when he hit that shot. That at that moment at least. You basically sent Michigan to the Final Four. But yeah, there's others. I mean, the Wagner's behind the back dribble move on Nick Ward. I don't, even if you weren't watching that game live, the GIF of that, as the kids say, has been replayed endlessly, making a defender fall. But I think it's just there's the Big Ten tournament run. There's so many to choose from. There, whether it was John Teskey dunking on Isaac Haas, or just another win over Michigan State, the first few minutes of that game where looked like they're going to be fists flying early. It really was a special season in many ways. Again, the most wins in program history, the most postseason wins in program history, even though they didn't win the championship. To get 4 wins in the Big Ten tournament and 5 in the NCAA, they never had 9 before in one season. Granted, the Big Ten tournament did not exist until 1998, so that's part of it. But it really was a remarkable season and fun.
And your first covering of the team for MLive.com.
My first one on the beat. It was pretty unique in that way too. We all, it was kind of amazing to me. You all say the media members, the beat writers, like shake Beilein's hand, outside the locker room, like when the season's over. It's like even with the loss, he was, perfectly cordial and classy about it all, and you just had a few words with him. And
that's just like how Mel Pearson is too. And they're,
Okay.
they're good friends.
Yeah,
So
I saw your story
yeah,
about
they're
that,
very good
how they
friends.
talked. Okay,
So,
yeah. I mean, I didn't know what to expect there. I was like, this is kind of weird because you're with them for so long during this run, and now it's just like, well, see us in several months. But yeah, you do kind of have your word, and my daughter was born on the day of that exhibition game that Aaron stepped in and covered, that very first one, and I reminded him of that and said, and now she's 2 years old, so and it was just like he got it, like, yeah, it's been a long season.
Kind of going off your top 5 moments, I don't want to put you on the spot, I don't know,
yeah.
but I don't know. Do you think there was a turning point moment for this team in their season? Was it the win over Michigan State, or was it something else? Or
yeah, I mean, a lot of people have asked me about like that 20-point loss to Nebraska, because really after that they lost some games, but that really they got going after that. But to me, that was like that Nebraska team. They didn't make the NCAA tournament, but they had talent. They were a tough matchup for Michigan. Michigan obviously completely flipped the script on them in the Big Ten tournament. And it was after beating Michigan State on the road, beating Maryland at the buzzer. It was kind of a tough stretch. So I would say what really the win at Wisconsin was when the offense played really well. I'm trying to think what the date on that was. It was February. Early February. That got them going. Offensively, and it was like, okay, we know what we are defensively. Like if we can have this kind of shooting game, this is the kind of team that we can be. And unfortunately for Michigan, it never, other than the Texas A&M game in the NCAA tournament, they never really found that level, in the NCAA tournament. And yet they still found a way to get to the championship. Right, so, I would say that was a game. Duncan Robinson started that game because Livers was hurt, and he really got his confidence going. So, I would say that game, despite it being against a team that finished under 500 in the Big Ten, it was still a very important win.
Yeah, sometimes you need those type of games, especially that late in the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll see. Obviously, a lot of questions that we'll be addressing on this podcast on MLive.com as far as the future for this team. It's you can speculate about the starting lineup and the rotation all you want, but the fact is there's still a couple of players that we're not sure if they'll be back. Most notably, of course, is Mo Wagner. As much as you think he's probably going to go, he's got a year of eligibility left, and he has not declared. So. You just don't know, and once that happens, more pieces will fall into place, and we can figure this stuff out. But yeah.
Bottom line, it looks like both the Michigan basketball team and the hockey team exceeded expectations this year. So and they both have pieces moving forward that it looks like their programs are both heading in the right direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Football will be the primary focus for these next. Few weeks. Spring game on Saturday.
Practice 9 and 10 this week. They got the spring game, and they practice 4 more times after the spring game, which is kind of rare for usually the spring game usually wraps up spring practice. This kind of sits in the second third of the schedule. And then they go to Paris. They're in Paris April 26th to May 3rd. They will not practice there. It's going to be a team trip, something that they're going on, enjoying the sights, and they did that to the most degree last year in Italy. It was mainly a team trip. They practiced, I think, 3 times. But it's going to be a total team trip. Harbaugh and the players are going, and more bonding time. So
looks like there will be plenty to talk about here in the next couple of weeks. Thank you for joining us on Wolverine Confidential. We'll see you next week.